One thing I like to do is tell you about the hero's journey. For me, it's a good kind of a guideline or a way of thinking about these kind of experiences, and it gives you a few ideas of what might be helpful and how to approach or think about these kind of experiences. The way I see it is a system should be self-correcting, so it kind of keeps on going, right? It has this capacity to take a bit of a knock and kind of realign itself. But sometimes that doesn't happen. Like in your body, your blood pH does these kind of things where you add acidity to it and it kind of neutralizes that. You add alkaline to it and it neutralizes that. And I see when a system gets knocked out of alignment and it doesn't have the kind of internal resources to realign itself, then it has a problem and it kind of runs into, it's like you're getting sick and you're spiraling towards death or whatever. And then if there is no internal resource to fix that, the way I see it is a system kind of takes the symbolic hero and sends it out of the system to find whatever it needs to heal the system. So I've been talking about systems because that's kind of a good kind of abstract way of looking at things, but you could think of a kingdom, like in these old stories you'd have, like in the Lion King, you'd have the kingdom with healthy and kind of rejuvenating itself, but then the evil uncle takes the throne and that kind of knocks the system out of balance and it becomes kind of corrupted, and then something needs to happen to rebalance that. So Joseph Campbell has written a book about the kind of the archetype of the hero's journey, and he'd been looking at all these stories all over the world and distilling the underlying thread that kind of combines all these stories together. So he writes about that in his book called The Hero with 1,000 Faces. Very interesting book, very complex, so I won't cover all of that. Just pick out a few little things that I really like. And that's been inspiring to me. And he describes this cycle. So it starts with the hero that is at home, and that could be of course, in all kinds of different types of situations. But usually it's the hero knows their place there, they know who they are and how to relate and where they fit into society, and they've learned that place. So the first step of this hero journey is that the hero leaves the home, and the idea is that if the home, the kingdom, or your body, or your society, your family, or whatever, is kind of knocked out of balance and can't realign itself again, you really need to get out of that to find something really outside. So the first step is always that the hero goes into the wilderness, where his home doesn't work anymore, where at home he might know which fork goes with which dish, or how to address this lord or that lady or his neighbor or whatever. And the idea is the first step you take is really out of all of that, and you go into the wilderness where everything is unknown. You might meet a bear that doesn't really care which fork goes which dish, or how do you address them or not. The idea is that you're thrown back to your deeper self, not the things you've learned, how to deal with society, but really kind of who you are at the core. In this book, Joseph Campbell points to some Arthurian knights stories where these knights decided to go and find the grail. Grail, very kind of archetypal symbol of that rejuvenating element, a thing to find and to have your adventure to uncover or to reach. So the knights decided to go and quest for the grail, but they didn't go together. They all went their own separate ways. Each knight went their own way, and they went into the forest, which is kind of the symbolic wilderness, where the forest was darkest and there was no path. So the idea is you don't go with someone else because you're on your own adventure, and if it's your adventure, you don't want to follow somebody else's adventure, you want to follow the adventure that really is there for you. And then you don't follow paths that are already trodden, because if there's a well-trodden path, you won't find any real treasure there. It would be found by somebody else. So you need to go there into the wilderness where you don't know what's going to happen, where nobody's been before, and that's the place you need to go to find the thing that you can't find at home. So you need to get yourself lost. And I really like that about that first little kind of step of the hero's journey, because that's really what we're doing in these psychedelic experiences too. You're really getting outside your normal consciousness. And when you find yourself like a little bit overwhelmed and confused, I just wanted to kind of tell you this story so you know you're on your right way. And if you're confused, great, that's good, keep going. If you find like, oh, I think I understand what's going on, maybe you need to get a little bit more lost. Then often in these hero's journeys, the hero often, all kinds of strange things happen to them, and they might run into very confusing situations where often, and I've heard and read quite a few fairy tales and myths, and often it just doesn't make a lot of sense. All these strange things keep happening, and I started to realize, also with the help of this kind of hero's journey archetype, that it's really not the point to understand what's going on, because there's also a way of trying to fit it to what you've learned in the past. So the idea is, if things are confusing, just let them happen, let them be confusing. The idea is that the hero, with each of these little adventures, little events that are happening, is changed and changed and changed and changed until they are the person they need to be for that final confrontation where they might be able to gain the grail. For instance, I was watching The Green Knight, and all kinds of odd things happen, and you get robbed and left kind of bound to die and you say, why is he suddenly, like, he doesn't have a sword, he doesn't have a shield, he doesn't have his horse anymore, he's there. Why did that have to happen? But who knows, maybe that just needed to happen so that he didn't rely on all of that stuff and he had to figure out his way through. What needs to happen is often not really apparent, it's not very clear either, so just the invitation is just to show up and deal with it the best way you can. And sometimes that means being strong and wise and relying on your wits, and sometimes that might mean to run away and save your hide, and who knows what is needed, right? But if you stay true to yourself and stay authentic, and you feel like, oh, this is not for me, then feel free to kind of go around. Or if you feel like, ooh, it's going to be tricky, but oh, I think I have to do this, then maybe that's what you need to do. There's also always a helper. You always get some kind of magical support. There's always, in these fairy tales, there's always an toad that gives you a little talisman, or an old lady that turns into an angel if you treat them well and gives you some advice, or a hermit that has some magical spell or something. There's always some kind of strange support that happens. If you're on your adventure, you will be supported. And it's kind of somehow nature kind of conspires to support you to get to where you need to go. And then, of course, there's more steps, but I'll skip many of those. But so then you get to the dragon. That's kind of that symbolic final battle or final challenge. And that's a really interesting one too, because those dragons, they come in all kinds of shapes and sizes. And there too, it's not always apparent what needs to happen. In those kind of Arthurian night stories, often they slay the dragon. But when I was trained when I was at the ayahuasca retreat and they were training me, one of the teachers there said, if you're like, that little prince in the Lion King or something like that, you're out there in the wilderness and you have to come back and confront an evil uncle. Maybe you want to befriend this dragon, because coming home to an evil uncle who's quite strong, it might be good to have a dragon at your side. So it might be better off not killing this dragon. So it's not always apparent what needs to happen. And again, it's like the invitation is not really to try to understand, but to trust your gut, trust your instincts, and follow that, and know that if this is your adventure, if you follow that truly, you'll find your way, and it'll be okay. And yeah, so and there are many strange examples of that. I was thinking of the Lord of the Rings, for instance, where poor old Frodo's with that ring that's getting heavier and heavier and so seductive, and he's dragging it all the way, and then you can see that final challenge happening, so he has to let go of that thing and destroy it. And then in the book, he doesn't have to do that at all, because Gollum is there and he does all that hard work for him, and that's really it's like, oh, so what was his final challenge? It seems to have kind of disappeared. But looking back, maybe his dragon was or his challenge was to get to that mountain while being compassionate to that little strange creature that was so hard to be compassionate to, and bring him along. And because he did that, he was rewarded with the destruction of that ring and freeing the world of that evil. So who knows? Who knows what that will be? Then a good thing to keep in mind is if you face that final dragon, you've gotten that grail or the gold, you're only halfway there, really, because then you still have to go back home, and you finally have that kind of rejuvenating agent, but you're out there in the wilderness somewhere, and the home is still disbalanced, so you have to find your way back, and that can be a really tricky thing. And then sometimes when you do get back, people might not appreciate you and might not appreciate what you've done. I'm thinking of great artists who delve deep into the depths of their subconscious and brought up this big concept and put it on a canvas or in a play or written it out in a music piece or whatever, and then they die penniless, and 100 years later, their work is sold and is hailed as revolutionary and has changed culture. So it can be hard bringing that back. It's not always so simple, but that is a really important part of that hero cycle. And in our work, having your psychedelic experience is one thing, but how do you bring that back into your real life? Can be quite a challenge. For some, it's all natural and easy. And for some, it's like, wow, how do I take those lessons and bring them back to inform my life, to make my life better? It's just a few elements that I like taking from this hero's journey. And so the one thing is, the idea is to get lost, to get yourself out into the wilderness where things don't really make sense anymore. And when you find yourself there, then you're on the right way. Try not to make too much sense of things. It's not really what these adventures are about. Just allow yourself to just keep showing up and responding to whatever you experience. All your experiences will be very, very unique, and that's the point. And then, see if you can face that final challenge, and let's see what happens, and let's see what kind of grail you get out of that, and then, let's see how we can bring that home.